Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Hardie-Matthews and I head up the account management team here at Workbooks. Also on the session I've got my colleague from the marketing team, Ruth Thompson, and Ruth's going to be keeping an eye on any questions that might be coming in during the session. I'll try and spot them myself too, but there's quite a lot going on. In case you weren't aware, the latest version of Workbooks was released on the 16th of October. And in keeping with the last couple of releases, it focused on enhancements to make the product much more usable in terms of showing data when and where you need it and trying to make navigation of the system much easier. For those of you who attended our customer event in London in early October, you will have seen these changes before. But today, what I'm going to do is step you through the most significant changes using a mixture of slideware and demos of the product itself. If you've been on any of these sessions before, you'll be familiar with the format, hopefully. Before I go any further, you'll also notice, hopefully, that Workbooks has had a facelift and we've rebranded. Our new website went live on, I think it was the 7th of October or thereabouts, and you'll see that the new logo and the new color palette are gradually making their way into the product as well as being on the website. Just to give you a little bit of context, the rebranding came about because of feedback really from our customer base, people like you, and we were told that you like the platform, which is great, we're happy about that, but what you especially like is that you like our people and the way in which we work with you in partnership to deliver what we're now calling more of what you need. So we chose to move away, I guess, from the slightly cold color palette to a much warmer one, the orange that you'll see everywhere, along with some other complementary colors, and to a much more rounded, friendly logo to reflect that we are human. So I do hope that you like it. However, we're here today to talk about the new release rather than the rebranding. So let's take a look. The high-level topics we're going to be looking at today are enhancements to form layouts. This includes the ability to display a tab in a panel, a side panel, shown to either the left or the right of the main record that you're looking at. The idea being it makes it much easier to see all of the data that you want in one place without having to click around. There's also, amongst the form layout enhancements, there is a new tab that's available on case records and opportunity records called the Overview tab, and that helps drive best practice, and we'll cover that when I go into the product. There's also a new way to use dates and date fields, what we're calling the date picker, and there's the ability to configure the layouts of tabs on records. In addition, there's been a small, but I find it very useful change to the search and recent items functionality. Targets. Following feedback from you, we've now got an improved way that you can set up and use targets within reports. It's quite a large topic though, and it's one that deserves a bit more time than we've got on this session. So I'm not going to go into detail today. I'll give you a high-level overview, I think. But instead, in mid-November, we're going to be running a webinar dedicated to the use of targets and how to set up the new approach. So if you want to know more, please do make sure that you sign up for that session. Card view. Some of you may be familiar with the use of cards on form layouts, but we've now enabled you to show more information in a smaller space using card views on grids of information. So grids like landing pages and reports, and there are lots of different types of card layouts. Again, we'll look at that in the next 20-30 minutes or so. Dashboards. Dashboards is an incredibly useful way of pulling together the data that you need in your organisation, and we've done some work to tidy them up and make them look much more appealing, much crisper and cleaner, as well as being easier to use. Then we've got a brand new feature called Springboards. I'm not going to go into any detail. I'll talk about that when we get there. And we'll finish off by looking at some reporting enhancements at a high level. I'm not going to go into reporting as such, but I will talk about what we've changed. I'm going to start off by showing you the new panel that I mentioned, and it's going to be much easier for me to show you this in the product, so bear with me while I switch into that. There we go. You should now all be seeing the Workbooks desktop. I'm going to start with an organisation record. I'm going to start with Atlantic Computer Services, and you might spot that I've actually got a desktop shortcut for that. But I just want to show you a change to the search and recent items functionality. As soon as I've clicked search there, you'll see that now we've appended at the bottom of the search dialog box the recent items that you've had open. I don't know about you, but I often find that what I'm looking for is something I had open not very long ago, and I just want to quickly return to it. So it's available there. If similarly, if instead of opening search, I'd open my recently opened records, my recent items, that's now got a search dialog box at the top of it. So it works whichever way you look at it. But if you're looking at your recent items, if you notice on the right-hand side, it defaults to saying, I'm going to search within your recent items. But as always, you could change that to look within all items or a specific record type if you chose to. So a small change, but I've been finding I've been using that a lot since we got it. Now, Atlantic Computer Services is already showing in my recent items, so I'll open it up from there. So I'm sure your organisation records don't look exactly like this one, but hopefully they will look something like it. Imagine that I'm a salesperson and I've just been given Atlantic Computer Services to take care of at an account management level. So I want to get a feel for what's gone on previously with this particular account. And I can do that by clicking through all the different tabs and seeing what's been going on. Or I can use the summary tab, which is a great place for pulling together lots of different pieces of data that have been going on, information that's normally held on separate tabs. So that's good, that's helpful. However, it does mean that I am clicking between the main and the summary tab to get the details and possibly having to scroll down in that summary tab. Instead, what I'm going to do is use the view button and change this to one that we have set up, a view we've set up called the Organisation Summary Panel. This isn't set up in your database. This is just set up on this demo database, but it's to give you an idea of the sort of thing that you might want to do. So we've now got a side panel. It happens to be showing on the right, but you can show panels on the left if you prefer. And it's the system administrator sets this up within a form layout. They choose whether or not to display a panel, and if they display it, whether it's on the left or right. They also get to choose the default width of that panel. But if you notice, there are some buttons here, an ellipsis here, that means the end user can drag that divider and make the side panel wider or narrower, depending on what they want to see. And if you notice, the summary tab was the second tab after the main one on my organisation record. It's not there anymore because in effect we've pinched it from the main record and chosen to display it in the panel itself. So now I can see both sets of information at once. I can still scroll through, I can still open the records in this side panel because it's simply a tab being presented to me in a different way. As an end user, if I thought, well, that's great, I've got what I need from the summary tab now, I want to see something else, but still keep my main record open, then if you go up to the burger bar at the top right there, you can see I've got the choice of all the other tabs that exist for this record. So for instance, I could maybe choose transactions and they will appear on the right. So very useful for surfacing, quite a buzzword that's going around at the moment, but surfacing lots of information that you want easily in one place. Remember, as a user, I've just changed that tab, but if I were just to save this record, I won't close it right now, it will always go back to the default that has been set up for this particular form layout. So it's returning, it's loading on the right-hand side, the summary tab, and the width of that panel column, if you like, has returned to the default that's been set up. There are lots of different ways you could use this. Let me just give you one other idea, possibly. If I change this to the account management layout, this time the panel has been displayed on the left-hand side. And what's showing here is a dashboard tab, not just a regular tab, it's a dashboard one. This particular one has been set up to show how each of the companies that make up the Atlantic Computer Services group, how much they've spent. So you can see the different company names here. And notice this is a small change. I wasn't going to cover it specifically, but now on bar charts like this one and line graphs, you have the ability to angle the names that are on the axes. That's within the advanced settings when you're setting up charts. So have a little explore with that because it makes the visual appearance much nicer. And then further down here, I happen to have a pie chart that is showing me billings by product category. And these are just dashboards, so I can drill into these as normal if I wanted to. You might not like either of those ideas, but it's just to get you thinking about things that you can do. Again, the panel's on the left, but if I wanted to change which tab appeared in that panel, I've still, as an end user, got that ability. So have a think, and if you're not the system administrator, but there are things that you'd like to see in this way, then maybe have a word with your administrator and ask them to do it. And in terms of setting it up, let me show you how you do that. Clear my screen down. I've got here the account management form layout. So this is the thing that you would normally go to configuration, customization, and choose organizations, then choose which form layout you want to amend. This was the one that we looked at with the side panel on the left-hand side with the dashboard tab on it. This is set up, if you look about 2/3 of the way down the screen, there is now a field called form style. It's currently set up to say panel on the left, which means a specific tab on the left and all the other ones on the right. But you can see there the choices. If I set this at the moment, if you haven't set this up, all of your form styles will say no panel, full width form. But you can, if you want, go and choose to show the panel on the left or the right. And having done that, you would then be asked, if you are displaying a panel, you'll be asked, well, which tab do you want to be the default one that appears in that panel? In this case, it's the account management one, but it will be any of the tabs that you've said on this form layout. If I go to the tabs tab, any of those tabs would be available to choose in your specific tab. And you choose the default ratio. So the first number is always how wide the thing on the left is, whether the thing on the left is your main form or your panel. But you can see the choices there. And you've also got this checkbox to set the default window size. It won't be ticked by default. By default, on the right-hand side, you'll see how big your form would display. But if you wanted to change it, then you can within certain tolerances. And if you exceed it, you'll get a little message saying, oh, you've made it too wide or too high or too small, whichever way around it is. And it's a really good way to make sure that, for instance, particularly on things like custom objects, often they don't have very many fields on, and there might be a big expanse of nothing at the bottom of the form. So if you want to get rid of that empty space, for example, modifying the height of a form is quite a useful approach. So hopefully that made sense. Let me go back into my slides. So if you do want to use panels, and I hope you do, make sure that your system administrator either creates new form layouts or modifies the existing ones. And also, of course, make sure that users understand how they can benefit from seeing the data from the tab alongside other information. And make sure they know they can change the tab too if they want to. The next topic for the session is the Overview tab. It's a brand new tab, and it's been designed to help encourage best practice behaviours in users, really. It's only available on opportunities and cases. You won't be able to switch this on activities or people or anything like that. It's purely opportunities and cases. And it consists of 3 sections. Hopefully you can see them in the screenshot on the right, but we will look in the product in a minute. The first section, the top section, is next, sorry if I can get my words out, next steps. And that's where you can see the actions that you still need to carry out in connection with the case or the opportunity. The middle section is the people section, and that's where you can easily see all the people who are connected with the record. And the bottom section, previous activities and email, exactly as the name suggests, it shows you a combination of activities and emails that are connected with either the opportunity or the case. So again, you don't have to go to the activities tab and then separately go to the emails tab. They're spliced together with the most recent one at the top of the list. The Overview tab itself, the screenshot on the right, is it being shown just as a regular tab, so it can be used with or without the panel. Although I do think you'll probably get much more benefit from displaying it in a panel. So again, let's go into Workbooks and see it there. And I've got an opportunity saved here, so I'll just open that up. And again, you're seeing a panel on the right-hand side, but this time it's the overview panel. Our best practice in terms of both opportunities and cases, open opportunities and open cases, I mean, is that you should have at least one activity, future dated activity in place to remind you to follow up on that opportunity or that case. In this example, if you see at the top right, it says nothing planned, and there's an option to add a next step, which I will do shortly. But so that's driving behavior in users. It's a kind of electronic tap on the shoulder to say, oi, you haven't got anything planned. I think you should set something up. When I scroll down to the people section, I've got a couple of people linked to this particular opportunity. And in an opportunity context, it's likely to be the people who form the decision-making unit. You can add more people using the plus button here if you wanted to. Find someone else that's already on your system. The people who are shown in this people section are the same ones who show up on the people tab. You can see there's two people there and it's the same ones, Ewan and Alan. It's just that we've made it much easier to see them in the tab. I'll go back to the main tab, in the overview tab in the panel. And what's particularly nice about seeing them here is because we've got this sort of conditional formatting in effect, it tells us what their role in the context of this opportunity, or if it were a case, the context of the case, it shows us what their role is, but it also shows us what their disposition is really, what's their sentiment about it. So if I was to click on this grey bar for primary contact at the moment, it says Ewan is the primary contact. You can see I could make him any number of other things, budget holder, for example. I won't, but I could. And the status field, we're saying we don't know whether he feels positive or negative about us. It's not known, which is why he's just showing up with a grey bar. However, I could say, no, I know Ewan's, whoops, Daisy, he's positive about this deal. So close it to positive, and you'll see that the bar changes to green. So it's only a small thing, but it gives a real visual impact to your users to understand whether the people who are involved in the deal, whether the people who are involved in the case are feeling kind of positive or negative towards you. And then if I scroll down further, you can see the collection of previous activities and emails, the combination of both. So that's really useful for me to see what's gone on previously in respect of this opportunity. So I'll scroll back up, and while I'm here, I will set up a next steps phone call because I want to show you the new date picker, and I can do that quite nicely from here. If I click on let's create a new phone call, hopefully this record, again, the layout might vary from yours slightly, but it will look, I'm sure, familiar. It's automatically put Ewan as being the person that I want to call because he is the primary contact for this particular opportunity. Let me just minimize that for a moment. If it had been Alan that I wanted to call, well, I could call him directly by using the phone call symbol here. But if it was just an activity that I wanted to add for Alan, I could do so using the arrow next to the little sort of clipboard, the activity icon that we use. But to go back to the one that I was creating for Ewan, I'll put a subject in and imagine that this was due today. So just imagine that I have picked up the phone and I have called Ewan and we've had our conversation. And he's told me that he does want to speak to me, but he's a bit too busy to do so right now. But can I give him a call back in a week? So I can use these outcome and next steps fields. These two fields weren't new in this release. They came out in the previous one, I think. It might have even been the previous but one, but I think it was about 4 months ago that we got that one, those ones. So I can say the outcome is busy. Can they call back later? And the next steps can be follow up or whatever it might be. These fields are completely configurable by you. You can put your own choices in there. But if you see now the next due field has appeared, and I can click on the calendar and I can call him tomorrow or sometime next week. But in addition, there's a down arrow here. This is giving me dates relative to today. So if I were to say, yes, he has to call back in a week, I can just choose in 1 week and the system works out when that is for me. I don't have to work that out. So it's a small thing again, but it's really handy. And if I save and close that record, what's happened is the follow-up phone call that I've just Scheduled is appearing in my next steps. It's showing green at the top because it's not overdue. And if I scroll down, oops, shot past it. Here's the phone call that I have just completed today. Don't worry, there's something weird going on with our demo environment that says I completed it 14 hours ago, but that's just a problem at our end, so don't worry about that. We've added that date picker to the due date, the completed date, and the next due fields on activities. So you'll see that little down arrow automatically. You might have noticed it. Hopefully you've explored it already. But if you want to use the functionality elsewhere, you'll need to configure the date picker options at the form layout level. Here on the opportunity, for example, we've got a date field, the close date, but all it's showing is the calendar that you've been used to seeing. There is no down arrow on it because that one hasn't been configured. Let me show you what I mean. If I close that down. No, where did I put it? Not there. Oh yes, sorry, it is there. So imagine that on maybe an invoice where you've got a payment due date, you might just want to always be able to not default, but select that the payment date is X months or X weeks or X days after the day that you're generating the invoice. So here's my form layout for invoices. Let me make it a little bigger for you. And if I can find the payment due date here and open it up, down at the bottom, there's this new field that says relative date options, and you can see it looks slightly gobbledygooky. It says 15D, 30D, 2M, 3M. That's the way in which there is a special format in which you need to add the information in to control what's available on the date pick list. Don't worry about it in terms of you don't need to know all of these. There is a link here to our knowledge base that takes you to a list of the things that you can put in there. But it means that you can have different relative date options on different date fields in your system if you choose to. So let's have a look at that in situ, as it were. Oops. Sorry, I should have saved that because I prepped it before you came online. So I'll save that and save my layout. Now I've got an invoice on my desktop here. I'll just open this up to show you. And within the card here, we've got the payment due date. So again, I can still use the dates as I always have been able to, but now I've got the down arrow that says, oh, I can set this to be 15 days from now, 2 months from now. So quite useful. And I'll save and close that. So in terms of the date picker, as I've said, it allows the selection of a date relative to today. And if you look at the orange table there, that's not an exhaustive list of your options, but it does show the values that you can enter and how it will appear in the pick list. So hopefully you can see about halfway down there, you can use negative numbers. So -1 day would give us yesterday. We'd all love to have our invoices paid yesterday, I'm sure. But you can also have not just days, but if you put WD, it's weekdays. So a few options there to consider. As I mentioned, we have automatically out of the box, so to speak, made this functionality available on the due date, the completed date, and the next due date on activities. And if you want to put that functionality elsewhere, open the relevant form layout like I did with the invoice one and configure the options that the user can select from. Next topic, tab form layouts. We've had feedback from customers that they would like to be able to control which fields appear on the tabs in different form layouts for their users. So now you can, which is the good news. To do this, an administrator can control the tabs on the initial layout. So imagine, for instance, if you are on an organization record and then you open the people tab, you as an administrator might want the columns that appear to appear in a certain order or particular columns to appear. And you can do that now. You've always been able to display them as a list or a grid. You might be more familiar with that terminology, so you can do that. You can display them as a calendar or even a map if you've got the map module. It obviously depends on the kind of data that you're displaying. With this setting though, do remember that users can override how you've set it to look when they first go to that tab if they choose to. Most users don't, I have to say, in my experience, but they do have the ability to. So back into Workbooks. And if I open the Atlantic Computer Services organization record again, I'll just change the layout so I'm not seeing that account management on the panel on the left. Okay. I've got a tab here, the Nearby tab. In fairness, you'll only see that tab if you've got the mapping module, but hopefully my explanation will make sense either way. If I open up that tab, I've got a grid of information, which is fine. But as the admin, if you want it to be that as a default, when a user opens that tab, it displays differently, you can do that. So to do so, I haven't got a shortcut for this, but if I go into configuration, customization, and my record types, it's an organization that I'm wanting to modify, so find those. And I was on the sales layout, so let's modify that one. And go to the tabs and the Nearby tab, because that's the one I'm wanting to configure. This might sound a little bit clicky, and I guess it is, but you only have to do this once. If you choose to, you may choose not to do it, but now we've got a tab that wasn't there before called Default View. And just as you've always been able to, I could say, well, in the default view, I want the customer to show, or who created it, or the category, or all sorts of other fields. And I can do things like change the order, and I can drag and drop fields around. You've always been able to do that. But what you can now do is actually save this as the default. And I could save my default to be view as map or view as map and grid. I'll choose view as map. Right now it's putting Melbourne in Australia as the centre of the world. Don't worry about that. That will all work beautifully when I next do it. It's because the reason, just to let you know, if you see in tiny writing, you might not be able to see it, but it says displaying the Nearby tab for the organisation 3BT APAC. And so they are actually in Australia, so that would be nearby for them. It's just showing you an example. Now, the thing that I've noticed people forget to do to make this work is they forget to tick this box that says publish default view. They go and change it and think it's going to stay, and it's not. So just go and put a tick in the box, save and close that, and I'll save and close my form layout. And get rid of that. So I've still got Atlantic Computer Services open on my screen. Nothing magical has happened to the Nearby tab, but that's because I made the changes after I'd opened the tab. And if I go back and just save this record to commit this back to the server, so this is mimicking if somebody was opening it for the first time and going to the Nearby tab. And there we go. It's automatically displaying as a map. So how you can display data, often it's going to be displaying it as a grid, and you're just going to choose which columns of information people can see, or possibly even filtered views that people can see when they go to a tab. But if it is the kind of tab that supports dates, maybe the activity tab, for example, you could display that as a calendar if it made sense to you to do so. And as you can see, anything that includes map references, you can then display as a map. What I would say is that to get the most out of the things I've just been showing you, the panel, the overview tab, and this tab layout functionality, have a chat, as a group of users, have a chat about what you feel would be most useful to help drive your day, and then get your admin, or if you are the admin, then modify the form layouts accordingly to support the feedback. Let's look now at targets. So as I mentioned in the introduction, we've improved the way that you can enter and use the targets. And I'm not going to show you all of that right now, but I'll give you a kind of sneaky preview if you like. You will receive an invitation, as I mentioned, to another webinar in November. So if reporting and targets is something that you do, then I really do recommend that you sign up for that webinar. Even if you can't attend it in person, if you sign up for it, you will get the recording. So in the absence of that webinar just yet, let's have a look at what we've introduced. We have introduced a new record type called target sets. And there were a couple of drivers really for introducing those target sets. One was about having to address the challenge of having to enter your targets on multiple reports or report views. Now you can just set up your targets once and you can reuse them across multiple reports. So a little bit like, you set it up differently, but it's a little bit like putting a target into an Excel cell and then referencing that cell across your targets. Another challenge was the fact that if you set up a target for somebody and they haven't yet got any data to show against that target, maybe it's early in the month, you've got a target of sales or cases that they need to close or calls that they need to make, but it's early in the week or the month of that target, they haven't done anything yet, you wouldn't see a row of data for them, but now you can. You'll see the target and that nothing's been achieved against the target, but you will see it. Another aspect or driver for changing the way in which targets are created was the idea was to make it a bit easier to set up and manage, especially for users, say sales leaders, for example, who might not be very experienced at building reports, but have probably got the targets that they want their team to have neatly entered into an Excel spreadsheet. So we've created a couple of wizards to help you set up your target sets in the first place, and the target values can just be pasted in from spreadsheets. To be clear though, we're not removing the previous way of setting up targets. That's there as well. We're not getting rid of that. And actually, if you've already got some targets set up in some of your reports, hold on to them, don't ditch them, because what you can do is you can migrate them into the new target sets without having to start from scratch. So that was just a teaser. I'm not actually going to show you the targets, but please do join us for the next webinar. So the next topic that I am going to show you is card views. You may have already started to use or seen on demos and so on card views on forms, but we've now extended that, if you like, to be able to configure grids of information in a card format. So it applies to landing pages and it applies to reports. So we were just looking at the default tabs. So, you can customize those or landing page grids and so on by moving and hiding columns and applying filters. And as we've seen, displaying those as a map or a calendar if you want to. So all of that's great. But we do know that sometimes when you've got a lot of data, you might have to scroll over to the right, especially on reports or dashboards, and you have to scroll over to try and find what you're looking for. And it can be a little bit awkward. So we've introduced card view. There are lots of options. I can't remember the exact number. I think it's about 8 different options that we've introduced for the way that the cards can be displayed. They can be single cards, which take up the full width of this screen, in effect, or the form, with the data shown in 2 columns, like the screenshot that's on here now. Or they can be a multi-card view, so they're smaller, but more of them across the screen. And I'll show you that when we go into the product. The screenshot that's on there at the moment, that one is based on a report. And so it's really nice. It combines data from both the opportunity and the associated activities. And conditional formatting has been used to highlight key pieces of information. So you can see the red bar across the top of the first row saying no activity has been scheduled. So a bit like when we were looking at the overview tab or panel next to an opportunity, that showed on that individual opportunity that nothing had been scheduled until I put something in. And this report is showing the same thing, but we've used conditional formatting to make it pop a little bit. We've also used conditional formatting, if you can see a little bit further down, on the close date of the opportunity. So this one, the first one, is in green because it's in the future, so that's good. Had it been due to close maybe at the end of September, for example, then that would be showing up in red. So all of this is designed to try and drive the right behaviors with your user base. It's pretty, but we haven't just put it in there because it's pretty. The setting up of these cards has been made really quite easy, I think, because we've introduced a drag and drop editor. At this point, there'll be one or two of you saying, oh yeah, can we have drag and drop editors in the form layouts generally, please? And I'm completely behind you on that one, would love that. We haven't introduced that yet, but you can use drag and drop to set up the cards. So let's go into Workbooks to have a look at what I'm talking about. And close that. I'm going to go to my organizations landing page just to show you what I'm talking about. It's just my organizations there. Again, this should look fairly similar to your landing pages. I happen to have frozen the first column just to make it easier as I scroll across. But, you know, there is quite a lot of data over here. Maybe I don't need to see all of it. Maybe I do. But now, when I go to the view option towards the top right, as well as the options I had before about calendars and maps and all of that, I've now got this option that says view as cards. So I'll choose that. That's returned to me a pre-configured view. Let me just close that left-hand column, it makes it easier to see. So now I've got a pre-configured view. This is a multi-card view. The screenshot that I showed you earlier was a single card. This is multi-card. And our engineers have chosen to put some fields on there. So we can see the organization name, and if we've got a logo for them, that's showing. And then we can see miscellaneous, London, United Kingdom. May not be the way that you want these cards to look, but that's fine because you can edit these further. So if I go back to the view menu, I've now got, it doesn't say configure as cards now, it says configure view. And when I do that, now I've got the screen, this drag and drop screen that I mentioned, that allows me to change the way these cards look. In the top right, you'll see there's a field called card design. And if I use the drop down there, those are all the different options that we've got. So I could change this to single card. I can add banners and images and all sorts of things in there. I'm not going to, but I could. So in fact, you can even just see behind here that under Acme Limited, it says miscellaneous. So that means that's its industry. Now, if you know that's what that means, that's fine, but maybe you want to display the field label next to the value. So if I just highlight industry, hopefully you noticed that when I did that, there was a change further down the screen. I've now got a checkbox that I can tick, and as soon as I do, whoops, it's easier if I don't hover over it actually, it says industry in slightly bolder letters, and then in the square brackets, it's showing this is where I'm going to put the value for the industry. If I want to, I can click preview down here just to see the change that that's making to my records. And it will always use the first record in your list as the example that it's showing you. And that's the preview is a kind of toggle on, toggle off. So just click off it again to go back to the edit screen. I can drag other fields in. Maybe I want to see the annual revenue. So I just drag it in and drop it. You can see there's a green line. And again, if I want to show the label for that, you can see underneath it's saying though the field is annual revenue, and if I tick show field name, then that's what appears in the card further up. In addition, on these cards, we've got what we call action buttons. So you can see there's the action to call either the telephone number or the mobile number. There's the action to email either their main or alternate email and so on. If I wanted to be able to see more telephone numbers on that telephone drop down, if I go to the plus button on the right and choose alternate telephone, nothing appears to change, but when I use the drop down here now, you can see alternate telephone there as well. So to recap, I've just made a couple of changes. I've added in the alternate phone, I've put in the label for industry, and I've put in the field for annual revenue, including the label. Now you must remember to update this, otherwise the changes will be lost. But having done that, that's made the changes to all my cards. If you look at the first card for Acme, you can't see the annual revenue there. And that's because there is no annual revenue populated on the record for Acme. So even though I asked to see the field label, even the field label won't appear if there isn't a value. Whereas if I look at Amtico, the second one along, it says the annual revenue is 6.1 million and so on. So don't think that it's not working. If you look at the Bishop's Printers record further down, industry shows, but the town and the country and the annual revenue don't, because those fields aren't populated on the record. If I use the down arrow next to telephone now, I've got the ability to dial the alternate telephone because I added that in on what we call the action buttons. Remember, this is about configuring your landing page view. This isn't something I'm doing at a system administrator level. So this is just about you and what you can see. So any changes you make here aren't going to affect your colleagues. If you want to keep these, you can do view save or save as, just as you've always been able to do. So I'm just going to call this card view, very unimaginatively, but you'd give it a much better name, I'm sure. So now if I bring back my left-hand column, my view column, if I go back to my organizations, they're still showing in a grid view, but I've saved my card view, and there it is. I could have overwritten the my view with the cards just by setting it up and then clicking save. So hopefully you like that. You can do the same thing on reports. You can open a report and go to the view button and configure it as cards. But just a slight word of caution, I suppose, keep you on the straight and narrow. If you want reports on your dashboards to display as cards, make sure you configure the report after you've put it onto the dashboard. If you configure the report first and then put it onto the dashboard, it won't retain your settings, as I found out the hard way when I was testing this stuff. So take it from me. But if you do want to set them up like that, then open the dashboard where you want to configure something as a card. I'll open this sales management one. And in actual fact, this dashboard has already been set up. This first element on the dashboard here has been set up as a card view. It's been set up as a multi-card view with a banner and an image. You can see some images in there, images of the users as it happens in this case. If you wanted to modify these cards, or if this had first of all presented just as a grid report, the place to change it is within the edit of the dashboard. So I'm going to show the menu, edit this dashboard, go to my layouts, click on the cog of whichever tile or element it is that you want to configure as cards, and then go to the report tab. So I know, again, that might sound quite clicky, but it isn't something you're doing all the time. You just do it once to set this up. I'll maximize that to make it easier to see. Now, I happen to like the way that this card view has been set up, but if I want to see it differently, now I can go to View. Because it's already been set up as card view, I've got Configure View as an option. If it was just showing as a grid, I would see the option that says Configure as cards, first of all, but we're already partway there if you like. So I'm going to click on Configure View, and this looks very like the screen we just looked at when I was on a landing page. It's the same thing. Once you know how to do it in one place, you know how to do it in the other as well. It's just starting in the right place, really. Again, in the top right, we've got card design. This one says multi-card with banner and image centered. But to use the drop down, I've got other choices. I could maybe have the image on the left if I wanted to. I'm not going to change too much about this particular layout, but just to illustrate the point, if I hover over the image, the camera image that's showing there, you can see, hopefully, it's quite small, but, and it's just gone off, you can see in square brackets that it says assigned to photo. So what this is saying is if your user has a photograph uploaded against their user record, then I will show it. And if they haven't, I'll show their initials, is really what it's saying. So if I've got a photo of them and then their name underneath, maybe I don't need to see both. I know who my salespeople are, so I recognize them. So maybe if I wanted to see the number of opportunities that they've got, I could replace their name with that. I mean, I'm just doing this a little bit randomly. You'd obviously do it with a lot more care. As it happens, what this report is using, the report that's now driving this card view, is the new target sets. So we're getting to see, we will see when I bring it back into view for you, we'll see targets for people who haven't actually sold anything yet. So it is making use of that. The other thing while we're just here, I wanted to show you is there's this button towards the bottom left that says show grand totals, which I'm going to tick. Just take me on trust for that for the time being. And now I'm going to update. And actually, this is probably easier to see if I close this dashboard. and actually go and run it. Let me run that for you. So it doesn't look too different. We've still got the images where we've got them. Underneath, it tells me how many opportunities this person has got. This happens to be Anthony Khan, who I'm logged in as. We can see the actual that they've achieved. We can see the target. We've got conditional formatting that's controlling the color of the bar across the top. The person down at the bottom here, again, forgive me, this is a demo database and sometimes it's a little bit clunky. The person down at the bottom here, though, we're not seeing their initials, but their target is 75,000, but they haven't achieved anything yet. And I'll scroll down a little. You can see that they've got 0 opportunities. That's exactly what it's saying. And down at the bottom, because I ticked that box that said show the grand totals, it's now showing that for my entire set of records, the actual and the target, so I can compare the two. So that's about cards and card layouts. There's no easy way to say to you, go and configure this particular thing as this particular card, because it will depend on what resonates with you and what you like when you're looking at it. But the way that I've just changed that card view on this dashboard, unlike landing pages, because I've gone into the edit of this dashboard, this changes this view for anybody that has access to this dashboard. So by all means, change your landing pages to your heart's content and save them for yourself. But if you're changing a dashboard, be aware that it changes it for everybody else that's using it. So that brings me nicely, I think, on to showing you some of the changes that we've made to dashboards. How are we doing for time? Okay. It's a subtle change, but you might notice that we've cleaned up the appearance of dashboards to remove the hard lines between them. And we've also removed, there used to be a dark bar across the top of each tile. So we've got rid of that just to make it look nicer. As I hover over the element, I get to see the refresh and the open a new window buttons. We haven't taken them away. You just don't see them until you hover over. If I go into edit mode on the dashboard, we've got here a new category. We've had categories on reports for quite a long time, but we haven't had them on dashboards. So you can categorize your dashboards, make them easier to find if you like. We've also introduced this create new records option. You don't have to use it, but what you can do is create a button on a dashboard where you can create a new record directly from the dashboard without having to go to the start menu. So I've just chosen opportunities there. You can add multiple options here if you wanted. You don't just have to have one. That option is actually also available on the individual elements within a dashboard. So if I go back into layout and to the close one opportunities that we were just looking at, down at the bottom, it says create new records. It's exactly the same pick list that I can create new records from that element. Also, while I'm here, element height. We've been able to create double height elements or tiles for quite a long time, but now if you've got a report that's only got 2 or 3 rows in it, a small amount of data, you can make it half height if you like. So again, I would say just experiment with those. So again, I'll just run that. So now I've got my new opportunity button at the top because I added that to the dashboard. If I hover over the element, I've got the plus button there that allows me to create a new task because that's what I asked to do. One other thing that we've added, actually, and I should have done it when I was editing the element, but let me go back in and edit the dashboard. Sometimes we get feedback from people saying, yeah, when I'm looking at a dashboard, the name of the element doesn't really tell me much about what it's supposed to do. So if I go back in to edit this, there is a description here. So add a meaningful description here. Obviously, again, yours won't say that. It will say something about these are your opportunities for this quarter or this year or whatever it is. Now that I've done that, when I hover over the element, in addition to the refresh and the open and now the plus button, I've now got this information button. And I didn't put much in there, but it says add a meaningful description here. So it's to take away any ambiguity from your users when they're looking at this. Another significant, sorry, I've got some slides there on dashboards. I'll just click through them. Yep. Another significant change that we've made is the introduction of Springboards. And a Springboard is really a sort of home screen, and it's designed to provide users with the information that they need to help drive their daily actions, really. Each user just has one Springboard, and it's a collection of dashboards on multiple tabs. An administrator or a manager can push those dashboards, if they've got the right capabilities, onto a Springboard for a specified group of users. So you can say, I want all my customer support users to see a particular dashboard on their Springboard, for example. But individual users can choose to add a dashboard of their own choice onto their Springboard. And users won't see a Springboard until at least one dashboard has been added to it. After that, it will automatically appear when they log in. So let's look at that in the product, and you can tell I have speeded up a little because I've realized we're running short of time somewhat. So let me just close everything down here. What I'm going to do is just reload my screen, and when it comes back, sorry, I had that dashboard open. Let me just close that. Now on the right hand side here, you can see Springboard. It says My Springboard. This particular one has got two dashboards on it. This is where I get my spring and dashboard words muddled up, but bear with me. So I've got the Sales Executive My Day. This is the idea here, is that someone uses this to drive their actions on the day. And next to it is one that says My Performance. So it's saying, oh, well, this is how far I've got. These are just ideas. We're not providing these to you. We can give you guidance if you'd like us to, but you would have to set these up yourself. But it might give you some ideas of what you can do. With each individual dashboard, there is a blue button at the top, so I can maximize the dashboard out to make it easier to see. Or, close that one, I can maximize the Springboard itself using the arrow at the top. Those dashboards have been put onto my Springboard by somebody else, by an administrator or a manager. But as an end user, if I want to add a dashboard to my Springboard, I can do that. So let me just go and open any dashboard again. When you can see the actions column on the left, you can see there's an option here to add to my Springboard. When I click on it, that will change to remove from Springboard. So it's just toggle on, toggle off. So I'll close that dashboard. What that's done, hopefully you can see we've now got a burger bar to the left of my tabs on my Springboard because I've now got 3 dashboards on it. I've just added the sales management dashboard. As a user, you've got this cog button. Let me just move this over a bit. Here, you can dictate how wide your Springboard appears when it first loads up. This one's set to normal, narrow, wide, and so on. There is an option there to hide the Springboard. Don't recommend that, but we can't stop you from doing it. If you do, however, and then you want to bring it back, go to your preferences and you'll see an option there to do that. If I go to the Items tab here, this shows me the 3 items on my Springboard. And if I just scroll over to the right slightly, you can see that the top 2 don't have a delete button because they've been put on here by a manager. So as a user, I can't get rid of them. But I did just add the sales management dashboard. That was my choice, so I can remove it here if I wanted to. What I can do here, though, as a user, is I can change the order in which those dashboards appear. So I could click on my sales management one and say, actually, I want that to be first. Click Save. And if I just reload my screen once again, it will appear over on the right again. And this time, the first one that appears is my sales management dashboard. Hopefully you'll find Springboards really useful. We're already rolling them out here within our business, and I'm getting feedback from the account management team that they really like the way that it's pulling together the data that they need. They could be telling me fibs, but I think they're telling me the truth. So let me very quickly go over the reporting enhancements that we've introduced. There's been a small but significant change to some of the options that you've got here. Just to make you aware, if you are in the habit of adding new columns or criteria to reports where you've drilled through from one record type to another, now using the Save and New retains that association. So really quickly, there's a little video on here that's saying, oh, I'm going to add a column, link through to the employer and pick a field from the employer, and then save and new. And you see it retains that drill through. It's a tiny thing, but for those of you who are used to building reports, you might find that really helpful. Another really nice enhancement is that now we have just one function that will test whether a field is empty. You used to have to say, is it blank or is it null? You had to sort of combine two functions. Now we've just got one, the is blank function. We'll just check to see whether that field's empty. For those of you with the mapping module, there's now a function to help you measure distance in either miles or kilometers between the two locations. And finally, there's a nice new function, convert currency. I was using it just yesterday. If you use multiple currencies in your database, you can now use this formula, and it references the exchange rates that you've set up in your database on a specified date. So this is likely to be useful for any of those of you who want to report across multiple own organizations where the home currencies are different, or maybe you've got some custom currency fields in your database that you want to convert to your home currency. There's various use cases. So I whizzed through that. For those of you who don't have to dash off, does anybody have any questions that I need to have a look at? Ruth's nodding at me, so there's definitely some questions. Let me see if I can see what they are. Okay. Yep. Hopefully, Brian, you mean on an organization record, for example, where maybe you've got in your two columns, whether you've set them up as card views or not, it's a way that we have got it set up in our demo database. We've got the organization information on the left and we've got the primary contact on the right. We're using what you call a DLI, a dynamic linked item, to do that. It's very effective, and it's a way that when you select who you want you to be your primary contact, you can also pull through other information about them. So you could maybe pull through their email address and their phone, for example. There's a bit more involved in it than I can go through on this session, but I'll make a note to either I'll follow up with you or I'll get one of the support team to do so, but we can do that. I'm hoping I've understood that question.
Yeah, Brian has a few more, so maybe you can pick up those with him. We've also got here, is there any way we can display field label in card view even if the information is blank?
No, Jitender. I have asked the same question, and in fact, when we very first introduced this functionality, because it's the same behavior as if you set up a card on a form layout, the same thing happens. And when I was first testing that, I thought it was a bug and went back to the engineers and said, oh dear, you've done this wrong. And I was assured that they hadn't, and it's actually intended behavior. If it's an enhancement that you would like to see, then please do let the support team know. But for the moment, that is the intended display behavior.
I'm going to get one more question and we're out of time. It says, how do you enforce certain users to certain springboards?
Raza, we haven't at the moment got a way to say Jean must use this springboard, but what we have got is the ability to say, I want to share this springboard with a set of, with a user group. And actually, I don't think I actively showed you that. When you go into a dashboard, there is a field that says put this, I can't remember the exact label on it, but it's in effect, it'll be very clear. It says put this on the dashboard for these users, and you choose user groups, one or more user groups, and then it's on their dashboard and they cannot remove it. Sorry, Springboard. Told you I'd get those words mixed up. But yeah, so you do it from the dashboard, go into edit mode of the dashboard and add the user groups there. Okay. If anybody's got any questions that they want to fire through after the session, anything you think about perhaps after you've tried using some of this functionality, that's absolutely fine. And in terms of following up, then as always, I always promote our knowledge base, so do go to workbooks.com help. And within that, if you want to know a bit more about the specific topics that were in this release, then go to the releases and roadmaps section within the knowledge base. If you're a support admin, then you can always contact our support team. You can email them or you can call them. And of course, please do contact your account managers. They should be in regular contact with you as well. But if you've got any queries, do fire them through. They'd be happy to deal with those. So all that remains from me is to apologise for the fact that we've gone over by a couple of minutes. I hope that's okay. But thank you all very much for your time today. I hope you find these sessions useful. Your feedback on these sessions would be welcomed from our point of view, because it can sometimes feel like you're just talking into the ether and you don't know how useful these are. So please do let us know, for good or bad, so that we can make these as meaningful for you as possible. Ruth will process the recording of the session and she'll get that out, a link out to you in the next day or so. So feel free to share that with colleagues if you want to, if they weren't able to make the session. I hope, as I've mentioned and I've promoted a few times now, to see some of you on the Targets webinar in November. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you.